Imagine a moment when the whole world held its breath. Billions of dollars in investment. Headlines on the front pages of the biggest publications. Promises that everything was about to change forever. The way we get around. The way we get treated for illness. The way we'll live, work, and communicate. And then, silence. The company shuts down. The product disappears from shelves. The founder quietly steps down, and sometimes even ends up behind bars. Today we're breaking down 6 projects that were supposed to change the world, and why they didn't. These are stories about brilliant ideas ruined by execution, about technologies that were ahead of their time, and about people whose ambitions turned out to be bigger than reality could handle. Stay until the end. The last story might be the craziest of all. So, let's begin. In 2001, inventor Dean Kamen made a statement that literally dropped jaws across the tech industry. He said he was creating an invention that would be more important than the internet. No more, no less. Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, and other legends of Silicon Valley saw the prototype even before its release, and every single one of them was blown away. Rumors circulated that this was something so revolutionary that entire cities would need to be redesigned around it. So what was it? A two-wheeled, self-balancing personal transporter called the Segway. The idea was genuinely brilliant from an engineering standpoint. Gyroscopes and accelerometers measured a rider's body, tilt 500 times per second, and motors adjusted instantly to maintain balance. It was a real technological revolution in miniature. Kamen believed the Segway would replace cars in cities. That pedestrian zones would be filled with people gliding smoothly on these machines instead of walking or driving. The company invested hundreds of millions of dollars. The plan was to manufacture 10,000 units a week. Reality turned out to be completely different. First, the price. The first models cost around $5,000, a figure that instantly cut off the mass consumer market. Second, legislation. It turned out that in many cities it was unclear where you could even ride a Segway, on the sidewalk like a pedestrian, or on the road like a vehicle. Some cities banned them outright. Third, and perhaps most importantly, people simply didn't see the need for it. The Segway solved a problem that, as it turned out, almost nobody actually had. In its first 5 years, the company planned to sell 50,000 units annually. Actual sales over the first 6 years barely exceeded 30,000 units total for the entire period. The situation became almost tragically ironic when, in 2010, the owner of the Segway company, Jimmy Heselden, died after driving an off-road Segway variant off a cliff near his estate. The company changed hands several times until, in 2020, production of personal Segway transporters was finally discontinued. The brand survived only by pivoting to electric scooters and robotics, a completely different business than the one that once promised to change urban life forever. The Segway wasn't a bad invention. It just solved a problem almost nobody actually had, at a price almost nobody could afford. In 2012, Google pulled off one of the most memorable marketing stunts in tech history. Right in the middle of a live Google I/O conference stream, skydivers jumped out of a plane, landed on the roof of a building, rode bicycles, and broadcast it all live, in real time, through a small pair of glasses on their faces. These were Google Glass. The idea was simple but powerful. A computer built into ordinary-looking glasses. A small display in the upper corner of your field of vision. Voice control. The ability to take photos and videos with a glance, receive messages, get navigation, all without reaching for your phone. Time magazine named it one of the best inventions of the year before the product had even hit the mass market. The price for the first Explorers, as Google called its early users, was $1,500. People lined up just for the chance to buy the device. And then something happened that Google, it seems, never really expected. Society reacted not with excitement, but with anxiety. A special term even emerged, glasshole, for people who wore Google Glass in public places. The problem was the hidden camera. People began to realize that anyone in a coffee shop or bar wearing these glasses could theoretically be recording them without their knowledge or consent. Bars and restaurants started putting up signs reading Google Glass banned here. Serious discussions about privacy emerged that Google simply hadn't anticipated during development. On top of that, add the technical problems. The device overheated, the battery lasted only a few hours, and voice control often didn't work correctly. In 2015, Google officially discontinued sales of the consumer version of Glass. The project didn't die completely. It transformed into an industrial tool for warehouse workers and surgeons, where privacy is less critical and functionality matters more than style. But the dream that everyone would wear a computer on their face, at least back then, remained just a dream. Interestingly, this idea was revived about a decade later, this time in the form of glasses from Meta and other companies. Maybe Google Glass simply got too far ahead of its time, ahead of a society that wasn't yet ready to trade away a piece of its privacy for convenience. This is, perhaps, the darkest story on our list today. In 2003, a 19-year-old Stanford student named Elizabeth Holmes dropped out to found a company that was supposed to fundamentally transform medicine. The idea sounded incredibly appealing. Instead of drawing several vials of blood from a vein for tests, all you'd need was a single drop of blood from a finger prick. A special device called Edison would be able to run hundreds of different tests, from cholesterol to cancer markers, quickly, cheaply, and almost painlessly. Holmes compared herself to Steve Jobs. She even started wearing black turtlenecks like him and tried to speak in a lower voice. Investors believed her. The company raised over $700 million. At one point, Theranos' valuation reached $9 billion, and Holmes herself became the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world according to Forbes. The board of directors included former U.S. Secretaries of State, senators, and generals. The company partnered with the Walgreens pharmacy chain to set up testing locations across the country. The problem was that the technology simply didn't work. The Edison device couldn't perform the promised tests with sufficient accuracy. Many results were wrong, sometimes critically wrong, with people being given incorrect information about blood sugar levels, hormones, or even cancer markers. Instead of acknowledging the problem, the company, according to investigations, reportedly began secretly using standard lab equipment from other manufacturers to run the tests. The very same traditional equipment they claimed to be replacing, and passed off these results as the work of their own technology. In 2015, Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou published a series of investigative articles that exposed the truth. The company began to rapidly unravel. In 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes with massive fraud. In 2022, a court found her guilty on multiple counts of defrauding investors. In November 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison. She began serving her sentence in May 2023. Theranos isn't a story about technology that failed to work. It's a story about how ambition, charisma, and a willingness to tell investors exactly what they wanted to hear can mask the absence of an actual product for years. Thousands of people received incorrect medical test results. Some made important health decisions based on this faulty data. This is the most costly lesson on our list today, and the most dangerous. Now, a slightly lighter, almost comedic story. In 2016, the startup Juicero raised $120 million in funding, including money from Google Ventures, to develop a juicer. But not just any juicer. This was an internet-connected device priced at $499, designed to press juice from special pre-cut packets of fruits and vegetables that the company delivered to your home by subscription. The idea was to make fresh juice as convenient as possible. The device would scan a QR code on the packet, check its expiration date over the internet connection, and only then begin pressing the juice with carefully controlled pressure. The company claimed that pressing the juice required 4 tons of pressure, as much force as 2 SUVs. And this is where a single moment occurred that destroyed the company practically overnight. In April 2017, Bloomberg journalists decided to test whether such a complex and expensive device was actually necessary. They simply took one of the juice packets and squeezed it by hand. The juice came out, and nearly as fast as it did from the $500 machine. The video and article went viral instantly. People began joking that they'd paid hundreds of millions of dollars for an invention that lost to human hands. A few months later, in September 2017, the company announced it was shutting down. It refunded customers who had purchased the device, but the $120 million in investment had evaporated. Juicero became a symbol of over-engineering in Silicon Valley, when technological complexity gets bolted onto a product not because it's needed, but because it sounds innovative to investors. That WeWork started with a simple idea. Co-working spaces, shared office environments you could rent flexibly, without the long-term commitments of traditional leases. The idea itself was decent, even viable. The problem arose when founder Adam Neumann started describing the company not as a real estate rental business, but as something far grander. Neumann spoke about elevating the world's consciousness. The company positioned itself as a platform transforming the very nature of work, community, and even humanity's spirituality. Corporate presentations used phrases like capitalist of community instead of the ordinary chief executive officer. Investors, including Japan's SoftBank fund, poured in billions of dollars. At one point, the company's valuation reached $47 billion, more than the value of some airlines or hotel chains. But when the company filed paperwork for a public offering in 2019, investors got their first real look at the actual financial numbers. The picture was shocking. The company was losing billions of dollars every year. The business model was fundamentally unstable. WeWork signed long-term leases on buildings and then subleased the space to clients on a short-term, flexible basis. This meant that during any period of economic instability, the company could be left holding long-term rent obligations with no clients willing to pay. On top of that, at a conflict of interest, Neumann personally owned real estate that he then leased to his own company, personally profiting at shareholders' expense. The IPO had to be canceled. The company's valuation collapsed from $47 billion to just a few $billion almost instantly. Neumann was forced to step down as CEO, though he still walked away with a severance package worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The company did eventually go public later, in 2021, but at a far more modest valuation. In November 2023, WeWork filed for bankruptcy. WeWork is a story about how marketing rhetoric about changing the world can mask an ordinary, and not particularly stable, real estate rental business for years, and finally, perhaps the fastest and most expensive failure on our list today. In April 2020, the streaming service Quibi launched. Its founder was Jeffrey Katzenberg, a legendary figure in the entertainment industry, with Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay and HP, serving as chief executive. Quibi's idea was to produce high-quality, cinematic content, with Hollywood-level budgets and A-list stars, but specifically broken into 10-minute episodes, designed to be watched exclusively on a smartphone. The logic was simple. People no longer have time to watch full-length movies or shows while on the go, so give them premium content in bite-sized pieces. The company raised nearly $900 million before it even launched. Investors included some of the biggest Hollywood studios and tech giants. But the service launched just weeks before a global lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's where the concept's fatal flaw revealed itself. Quibi was built for viewing on the go, on the subway, during a commute, during short breaks. When the entire world suddenly found itself locked down at home, that unique advantage turned into a complete non-necessity. People were sitting at home with big TVs and plenty of free time. Why would they watch content chopped into 10-minute chunks on a small phone screen when they could watch full-length shows on Netflix on a full-size screen? Add to that another critical mistake. At launch, Quibi couldn't be viewed on TVs at all, only on smartphones. The ability to cast to a big screen wasn't added until months after launch, by which point it was already too late. Despite star-studded casts and directors attached to its projects, subscriber numbers remained tiny. In October 2020, just 6 months after launch, Quibi announced it was shutting down. $900 million in investment was almost entirely lost in less than a year of operation. It's one of the fastest and most expensive failures in the history of the streaming industry. Not every project on this list promised to change the world through technology. Some promised to change it through pure experience. And this one might be the most spectacular collapse of hype in modern history. In 2017, entrepreneur Billy McFarland and rapper Ja Rule announced Fyre Festival, a luxury music festival on a private island in the Bahamas, once supposedly owned by drug lord Pablo Escobar. The promotional video featured some of the world's most famous supermodels frolicking on white sand beaches, promising attendees gourmet dining, luxury villas, and performances by major artists. Tickets range from $1,200 for basic packages to well over $100,000 for the most exclusive VIP experiences. Thanks to a massive influencer marketing campaign, models and celebrities posting a single mysterious orange square on social media, tickets sold out within days. Behind the scenes, however, almost nothing was actually being built. The festival was being organized in just a few months, on an island with no real infrastructure, no adequate housing, and no functioning kitchen system to serve thousands of guests. When attendees arrived in April 2017, the gap between promise and reality became instantly, brutally clear. Instead of luxury villas, they found disaster relief tents sitting in mud. Instead of gourmet catering, they were handed a sad cheese sandwich in a styrofoam box, which instantly became one of the most infamous images of the entire disaster. There was no headline entertainment. Luggage was scattered and lost. Some guests were stranded on the island overnight with no clear way to leave. The chaos unfolded live on social media, turning what was meant to be an aspirational luxury brand into a global punchline within hours. McFarland was later charged with wire fraud. Investigations revealed he had misled investors with fabricated financial documents and had even sold non-existent tickets to a fake festival ticket marketplace app after Fyre Festival itself had already collapsed. In 2018, he was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and ordered to pay over $26 million in restitution. Fyre Festival became the subject of 2 competing documentaries and an endless supply of internet memes. It's a story less about failed technology and more about failed honesty. A masterclass in how modern influencer marketing can sell people a fantasy with almost nothing behind it. Our final story takes us into the world of clean energy and government-backed ambition. Solyndra was a solar panel manufacturer founded in the mid-2000s with a genuinely clever piece of engineering. Cylindrical solar tubes, rather than the traditional flat panels, designed to capture sunlight from multiple angles and be easier to install on commercial rooftops. The company positioned itself as the future of solar energy in America, proof that the United States could lead the world in the transition to renewable power, competing directly against the wave of cheaper panels beginning to flood in from China. In 2009, the U.S. Department of Energy backed that vision with a $535 million loan guarantee, part of a broader push toward green energy investment. President Obama personally visited the company's factory in 2010, calling it a symbol of the clean energy economy America was building. But the market shifted faster than Solyndra could adapt. The price of traditional silicon-based solar panels, largely manufactured in China, collapsed far more quickly than anyone had predicted. Solyndra's more expensive, more complex cylindrical technology suddenly made no economic sense next to cheap, mass-produced flat panels. The company burned through cash trying to compete on price while operating with a fundamentally more expensive manufacturing process. Despite the massive government backing, Solyndra filed for bankruptcy in August 2011, just over a year after that celebrated presidential visit. The collapse became a major political controversy in the United States, with critics using it as an example of government overreach into private markets and questionable investment decisions, while defenders pointed out that some failures are a normal, even necessary, part of funding early-stage innovation in any emerging industry. Solyndra's cylindrical tubes were genuinely elegant engineering. But elegant engineering doesn't automatically win against a competitor selling something nearly as good for half the price. And no amount of government backing could change that basic economic reality. So what do all these stories have in common? The Segway solved a problem almost nobody actually had. Google Glass ignored the social and ethical consequences of its technology. Theranos was built on lies where there should have been science. Juicero added complexity where none was needed. WeWork disguised an unstable business model as a philosophy. Quibi created a product perfectly tailored to a world that vanished just weeks after launch. Fyre Festival sold a fantasy that never had any real infrastructure behind it. And Solyndra built genuinely clever technology that simply couldn't survive a market that changed faster than anyone expected. Every one of these companies promised to change the world. And in a sense, each of them really did change something, just not the way they'd planned. They became lessons, case studies in business schools, warnings for the next generation of entrepreneurs. Maybe the real lesson here is simple. Promising to change the world is a lot easier than actually doing it. And often, the difference between a revolution and a failure isn't the brilliance of the idea. It's attention to the simplest, most mundane details of reality. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe. A follow-up video about even more unbelievable failures from major tech companies is coming soon to the channel. See you in the next video.